Hey, welcome back again to another episode of Blam Blam Truckers. I am
Blam.
Buse. Blam Blam, both barrels. That is Bees, and today we are talking about gaming, because we don't do it enough. But what specifically are we talking about, Bees?
So, this episode is going to be about the system that is 5e for Dungeons & Dragons. It's 5th edition. It's not the 2024 version. Hughes and I are starting a game tomorrow, as of the recording of this episode. Probably not when it comes out. We'll have probably already played that. We both played 3rd edition before, and we played other D20 style games. I played the Transformers D20 game that came out by Renegade.
Oh, you did end up playing it?
Yeah, I had to run my own game and go through the rules and sit down. I needed to make sure I understood how it worked.
Yeah, similar to what I did with the back in the day with the D20, based off the 3rd edition version of the Star Wars one. I sat down and made like a single player adventure for myself and ran through it.
I played that too. Anyway, I wasn't that impressed. It wasn't bad, just I had D6, which is what I'm going to go back to comparing this to. I'm a D6 guy. Hughes here introduced me to D6, and it is the best system I've seen. I've played a bunch of different systems. It's the most robust. It is one of the simplest systems. I really like it a lot. And the only thing you have to understand is dividing by 3 for your stats. If you can divide by 3, you can make a character. And if you can count up to, 18, you can make a character. Both of those should be skills that you already have long before you started role-playing. Or most of us do anyway. So, very simple system, very easy to use, very easy to translate to other media. It wouldn't be hard for us to do a Transformers and G.I. Joe game, or a Transformers and Star Wars game, or a G.I. Joe and Star Wars game, or anything in between. Medieval fantasy, there's systems in place for that. We're running a superhero game that you guys got to see part of at the very beginning of the channel. And you get to hear our recaps of every once in a while. So yeah, I love the system. It's very simple, it's very versatile, and it tends to balance itself out as long as you don't fiddle with too many things. Don't give out too many character points. Don't let people, improve their skills every session. Give them time to adjust, and don't change the rules on the fly. Try and actually play the rules out as they're written. And you're going to find that the 2nd edition of Star Wars Revised and Expanded is a very solid system. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about D&D 5th edition, which I have been studying for the last 2 weeks in the hopes of trying to understand it well enough to feel confident while playing it.
And break the game.
I don't know if I can break the game. I don't think this game can actually be broken.
Is that a good thing? I guess to start off with questions?
I'm sure it can be, but the way to break a game is to take it to the way we break a game. I mean, there's all sorts of ways to break a game, but what we're talking about is min-maxing, finding the optimum way to play, is there a best combination, the most powerful combination? And it's kind of the way you play Magic the Gathering. You try and find within the rules how you can play the game within the rules and do the most damage to your opponent. It's that mindset of making the best Magic deck you possibly can, put combos together, or find a way to get an advantage inside the game while you're playing. Min-maxing, Magic the Gathering decks, stuff like that. So there are definitely combinations in D&D 5th edition that are quite powerful. I will be taking one of them, which is, if we play the game long enough for me to level enough to do it, Crossbow Expert defeats Crossbow Expert and Sharpshooter, which gives you one extra. Crossbow Expert will give you one extra attack per hand with a hand crossbow, and Sharpshooter adds 10 damage points to every range shot with a crossbow, or every ranged attack, I forget which. But either way, it is a known combo inside the game that's from the player's handbook. Like, this isn't from an edition that came in, and like in Magic the Gathering, when you play 2 cards from 2 different series, and those series were never meant to be played together in standard format.
My Eldrazi deck, yes.
Yeah. Elvish. There's a reason why Elvish Piper didn't. Did Elvish Piper come out with the Eldrazi deck?
No, it was from like 2 or 3 years beforehand. The original, well, when we played Eldrazi, I should say. I think there had been Eldrazi before that.
They've been back to Zendikar a few times. So anyway, so that's one of the combos I found. And I'm playing as, my current plan is to be a Battlemaster Fighter with an archery bent, and that's why I'm going with that combo. I could have just as well with a Battlemaster Fighter gone with Great Weapon and Polearm Master, and if I really wanted to, add in the Feat Sentinel, and it does basically, without Sentinel, it does basically the same exact thing, only with a two-handed polearm in that particular case. You put these things together. There's not a lot of room for combos in 5th edition. I've watched a lot of the best of video, and you have to take, it usually comes down to multi-classic. When people are putting together these game-breaking combos, they're only game-breaking for the first, 10 levels of the game or so. If you're playing a class, generally you want your 20th or 18th level, you want those later abilities that are more powerful than those combos that they put together for you by multi-classing. There are exceptions to this, and most games don't get to 20th level. It generally takes years to get there. So, something to think about, unless you start at high level. But they stripped it down. They stripped down 3rd edition. They refocused it on combat. 90% of the rules, probably more than 90% of the rules in the 5th edition are about combat.
Mm-hmm.
That is not the case with D6. That was not the case with 3rd edition. There are a few rules talking about how to use your out-of-combat skills, and sometimes your combat skills, like stealth and detection, or deception, and perception, and insight, and nature, and all that stuff, and history. But that's only a few pages in the player's handbook, or the GM's handbook. I forget which one it was in. And then there's a tiny section in a little bit in the Game Master's handbook where it's mentioned in passing about how to create magic items. But that doesn't really get any focus until the Artificer class is created. And even then, only Artificers can do what Artificers do, for the most part. So
yeah,
you're not... Go ahead.
Oops. No, I was going to say, we were talking a little bit before we had started recording even, like in 3rd edition, specifically, like, you could be a blacksmith in addition to being a fighter, because like every class could choose like a crafting, skill or whatever if they wanted to. You didn't have to, but it was one of the choices, and it was one of those things that any class had the ability to choose it as one of their class skills or whatever. And it was fine. It made sense because, yeah, your character had a profession outside of fighter, ranger, whatever. And it's something that has been a trope in like stories for as long as I can remember. Like, I remember reading the Dragonlance series back in the day, and Flint was a blacksmith.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered reading, well, it's not specifically based on RPGs, but I remember reading the Wheel of Time series. And I think of how in real life, as well as specifically Perrin in the Wheel of Time, like, you sometimes use skills that you're good at to just take your mind off of stuff or to process. And as people who are big into role-playing, that is something you might want to do. Again, I just think of that story because I've listened to it again recently. But like, Perrin was trying to work through stuff in his head. He came across a blacksmith who didn't look like they had an apprentice working or anything, and he started pumping the bellows, and then it got to the point where the guy just wanted to see what he could do. So he just tossed him some stuff, how to make like a horseshoe or whatever, and then tossed him more stuff and realized that, hey, this guy actually knows what he's doing. But for Perrin, it was just a way of working out stuff in his head as he was just, pounding the metal, shaping it, whatever. And in real life, like, I use video games sometimes, but I've also repaired stuff. Bees mentioned in Star Wars, like, Anakin would, process stuff by fixing things because things just make sense.
Things make more sense when you're fixing things.
Exactly. So it's a little saddening that they took that aspect of character and I call it character creation out, because that's part of who you are. Now, I know people will be like, well, you've got the backgrounds and you've got the guild, you can have the guild background, or I think artisan background or whatever. But yes, but if there's not really the skills to go along with it, it kind of takes away the importance. But that's just me.
It is not the focus of the rule set. The rule set for 5e is almost entirely focused on combat. And the combos that do, like, there were other combos there. I only mentioned one or two, but there's the idea of making what do they call it? A hazard on the battlefield. Like, you change the ground so that it's spiked up and people take damage as they go across it, or you put a bonfire in the center of the ground, and then you use spells to pull people back and forth across it, like Eldritch Blast, or with the Battle Master, the pushing, your arrows, your ranged attack, your attacks can push somebody 10 feet. So the idea is to keep forcing the enemy to go through this, or put up a magic dome so they can't get out after you've created a hazard in there that will kill them, and you just hold them in there and they just take gradual damage over time until the spell wears off, and they can't do anything to you because they can't get out of your magical dome or whatever the spell is.
I was actually thinking about that with one of the spells I'll have access to, I think, in a level or two, which lets me create spinning blades on the ground. I'm like, based on how wide that is, that would be perfect to do in front of a doorway, and you defend the doorway, and in order to get to you, they have to
go through the spinning
or
blades.
Walk through that.
Yeah. Or the cantrip, create a bonfire, or just bonfire, but you create a 5 foot by 5 foot flame by 5 foot cube of flame, and it stays up for, I don't know, a minute, and it'll catch anything on fire that's in the area, and it does 1d whatever, 8, 6, 10 damage to anything that travels through it. Not a bad cantrip. Pretty neat idea, actually. So anyway, the focus of this game is not on, despite the fact that it is very much so focused on role-playing, the rules themselves are not focused on role-playing. There's spells you can do that are focused, that are built only for role-playing or to be used out of combat, and there are skills that are out of combat, but exactly how to use something like your lockpick, thieves' tools, whatever they're called. That's not very in-depth. You add the skill is, they don't even tell you what skill to use in the player's guide for lockpicking. I would assume it's dexterity, but
I assume
sleight of hand under dexterity.
Yeah, sleight of hand, yeah.
I didn't see it explicitly in there. I might have missed it, but I was looking for it, and dexterity is picking pockets and card tricks and magic and stuff like that, and planting things on people. It's a useful skill, but they never I didn't find it anyway, and I read through the player's guide. I may have missed it. I was skimming through a lot of that. And how much of a bonus does having these tools give you? Does it give you any bonus? Or do you just need them to actually attempt to use the skill pick lock? Only there is no skill pick lock.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, I remember back in 3rd edition and 3.5, like, yeah, you had like a pick lock and disarm trap skill, and yeah, you would use them, improve it. And even with these tools, you had, because I was looking for it at first because I'm playing a bard, and a bard is like a rogue who can cast, and there's many other things, but
there are rogues who can cast though.
But I noticed that, well, you could do that with some of the hero classes or whatever in the 3rd edition. But like, you used to have tools and masterwork tools, where masterwork tools would give you like more of a bonus, and that doesn't appear to be the case. And I'm like, but why?
No, it doesn't appear to be the case. And this is from a couple of guys who haven't played the game yet. We may be completely wrong about this, but this is from reading through the player's guide, reading through the game master's guide or book, and I'm not seeing it. It doesn't seem to be there.
No, and I'm actually just looking even through some of everything I'm looking at, because I'm looking through the book as we're talking. It's just like every single class or special ability in a class that lets you use thieves' tools. It's like, you can use these to disarm traps and pick locks. I'm like, so there's no failure. You just do a certain amount of time and you open it. As somebody who is into picking locks, in real life, you can fail. You can break a lock. I'm assuming with traps, you could accidentally set them up.
Yeah.
We'll have to ask Fiona.
Locks, traps in particular, were always a big part of D&D. And yes, D&D has generally been more combat focused than other role-playing games, than certain other role-playing games, especially D6, because D&D comes out of wargaming from the very beginning. First edition, they weren't trying to make a role-playing game. No one knew what a role-playing game was. It hadn't been invented yet until D&D came along. And then they didn't know what they had. We covered this in another session. They didn't know what they had. And once they realized what they had, they started making supplementary rules for it. We didn't get a complete rule set until Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and then second edition came out after that, which some people say that is second edition, blah, blah, whatever. I'm not getting bogged down with that. But a lot of that just isn't in this game. It's very much combat focused. I like having those rules. I like being able to take a look at that, figure that out. Go ahead.
I was going to say, looking at which I personally find this as an issue, and maybe I haven't gone far enough in, but I don't find the first rule about picking locks until I look at the lock in the equipment. And it's like, someone with these tools can pick this with a successful DC 15 Dex check. Like, that feels like something that should be...
There should be a section on how to use these skills, how to repair your armor. The only way to repair armor that I found any rules for is to use the cantrip Mend, which most magic classes have access to Mend.
But, okay, so thieves' tools just say you can add your proficiency bonus. If you have it, you can add your proficiency. If you have the ability to use thieves' tools, you can add your proficiency bonus to any ability checks to disarm traps or open locks. So it sounds like, realistically, for our game, Fiona will set a DC for like a difficulty for the lock or for the trap. If we have tools, we roll a dex check. If we have the ability to use the tools, we get to add our proficiency bonus, and that's it. But I shouldn't have had to go through, in my opinion, 3 separate spots. And go ahead and complain to me in the comments being like, you just weren't looking in the right place.
Good. Hey, tell us what the right place is.
Tell us where I should have been looking, because
those sections just for 2 of those skills, there just isn't.
It realistically, if it was because it's not a skill, it's just a check. If it was like, that's what's the nice thing about making it a check. A skill, as opposed to, it's just part of your proficiency. But actually, your proficiency is the skill. Actually, it is a skill. It's the way they do skills in this. Remember, you increase everything at the same time.
Yeah.
So, therefore, they're like, it's just the difficulty. And since you're proficient in it because you're a bard or you're a rogue or you've got that special ability, that special class ability or whatever, then you just get to add to it. So realistically, it still fits with what they were doing. It just wasn't described as well, at least for me, because I'm used to being like, pick lock skill, or I would have had it under sleight of hand. And I guess you can have it under sleight of hand, because I think most people who have sleight of hand also have, I don't know. If you guys think I'm overthinking this, feel free.
You're not.
Hit me in the comments.
You pay for a set of rules, you want a set of rules. You pay for a game, you want the game to be complete. Anyway.
I still would prefer 3rd edition based on this, because this feels like 3rd edition. It actually feels like 3rd edition more simplified, and because they simplified it too much, it makes it a bit more difficult. It's the way I felt about World of Warcraft after Wrath of the Lich King. And your mic's off.
I just had sorry guys, technical difficulty. Buse will probably take that out in editing. This is 5th edition is a simplified version of 3rd edition with a focus on combat, which is selling incredibly well, but it is and the ironic part is the rules themselves aren't simplified. They're actually quite complicated. Why do we roll stats? We never use those stats.
What do you mean?
Okay, so my character, because of the way all the stats added up, has an ability score of 20 in dexterity. Okay. At no point does that 20 do anything for me. The modifier, which I get off of a table, does something for me. I use the modifier all the time. I never use that 20 for anything except to tell me what the modifier is.
Right.
And the modifier is the score you got minus 10 divided by 2, rounded down. That's what the modifier is. So
That's
why
true.
am I
didn't think of
rolling
it that way? But
Go ahead.
I can say I didn't think of it that way. I just did the math in my head. But yeah,
Why am I rolling for these stats when these stats don't mean anything? I should just be finding a way to roll for the modifier or get a point buy system to get the modifier.
In all honesty, you don't have to roll for your stats. That's a GM chosen thing. There are ways that they give you points to use, but
either way, it's not the rolling for it that I have the problem with. It's the focus on these stats and getting them up to 20, and they're capped out at 20 when we don't use it for it's just used in the process of getting your modifier.
You would prefer to be given, let's say, and I'm probably doing the math wrong, but you'd be preferred to give 20 points even, and everything starts at -5, and you just chose where to put the 20 points so that you could be like, okay, 1 point, so now I'm just at -4 as opposed to you would prefer it to be like that, so at the very least your stats meant something more.
No,
if they were going to
that's not
go
what
bonuses.
I'm saying it's a waste of time.
We have stats in like every game. I'm not really sure what you...
I'm not saying the stats are a waste of time. I'm saying I've got 20 dexterity or 15 dexterity. That doesn't matter. That's an additional step. It convolutes, it complicates the rules in an unnecessary fashion. We should just be going off the modifier.
Right. And that's what I just said. I just created a system in my head for the modifier.
Right.
So pretty much you're putting your points into the modifier directly is what I'd said, and you said no.
I'm saying my problem isn't with yes and no. The problem is they're complicating the system for no reason. That's the problem I have. They're complicating the system for no reason. Now, is that going to stop me?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm assuming you felt this way about 3rd edition too, because this is the exact same way as it was in 3rd edition. Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
But D&D, this is how Hasbro is making its money off of D&D. They're making the rules more complicated and simplified. So once you get past these complicated steps that are not necessary, they're just there to complicate things. And they have all these rules. The gameplay itself is incredibly simplified.
I can understand what you're saying. I don't know if I fully agree, but I can at least understand where you're coming from.
The only thing they can sell you is the rule set. That's the only thing they can really copyright as their own. And specifically, the language that the rule set is written in is the only thing they can really copyright sell from a legal standpoint. The rules themselves, they can't copyright. The rules to a game cannot, under U.S. law, under federal law in the United States, you cannot copyright the rules to a game. So
we talked about that before when we were talking about D6 and all that. Yeah.
They come up with these rules, and it all works together a very specific way. And you have to either take a ability score increase or a feat, and that rule is an optional rule that's not very well explained in the text. I always have this problem with RPG books is how usually everything is spread out. So to get all the rules together and put them in just one list would take up like 3 pages. And instead they're all over the place.
I find the optional feat rule funny because they've been there, I guess, since 3rd edition. Everybody uses the optional feat rule. It's optional, but it's not really optional. Really, the optional rule should just be the every 4 levels or whatever it is, you can just get an additional ability point and not use feats if you so choose. That should be the optional rule, because that would actually it would make more sense, because you're giving me an entire chapter of feats, which are entirely optional. That feels like something you would add in a supplement if it was optional and get more money out of. Please don't listen to me on that. I don't want D&D players coming after me. I don't want some guy from Hasbro or whatever listening to this like, that's a good idea. We should do that for 6th edition. But
listen, that's been done by D&D. That's been done by other companies.
Oh, I know. I'm just talking about...
It's the standard in the industry.
I know, but not for, like, the very basic stuff. Like, yeah, they'll add additional classes and they'll add additional rules. Like, I remember having I forgot what it was called. It wasn't the Games Master Handbook. It was like the Advanced Player Handbook or something like that, which added like the hero classes or whatever in third edition. Like, I understand that because it's meant for higher level characters, whatever. Or
It's
like,
also
you add
something they came up with after they've been playing the game for a while.
right. And just like the Artificer, they didn't add that till later, and it's in a separate book, not in the initial player's handbook. That's
Right.
fine. But for something that's basic about building a character, yeah, I don't want them to add that in a supplement, like additional rules that we used to have, But anyways.
So another thing that drives me nuts in my character creation, there's no way for me to specialize as an archer in archery.
That's what the feats are for.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just, yeah.
So my dex is 20 because I rolled an 18 and I've got an extra 2 points for being an elf.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm at 20. I'm at the statistical max before magic items are added in.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't even gotten into magic items. If all I can do is I think I've got this right. And I've had to go on the internet because, again, it's not super clear in the Game Master guide when it covers how to do combat. I believe I roll a d20, which is, hold on, I got a whole jar of dice here for this. This is a d20, and here's
that
20.
Is a d20.
If you can see it, that's 20 right there.
Yeah, it's not.
So I roll a d20.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I add in my dexterity modifier as an archer, it would be dexterity. So I add in +5. So whatever I roll, let's roll one of these real quick. So I roll a 2. 2 plus 5 is 7. Then if I have proficiency, I believe I'm allowed to add in my proficiency modifier, which is another 2. So now I've rolled a 9 to hit.
I think that sounds right.
Yeah. Because I have proficiency in bows. And those 2 bonuses, that's the best I'm going to do. The +5 could go up if I get some magical plus dexterity weapons. And then because I'm a battle master and I took archery as my playstyle, I get another +2. So that 2 I rolled, I'm going to add 9 to it. 2 for being a battle master, 2 for my proficiency in bows, and 5 for my dexterity bonus. So I roll 9 to every roll. When I go up in level, my proficiency bonus goes up, but it goes up for everything I'm proficient in.
Yeah. But then again, in third edition, it wasn't even like that. It was actually, you still couldn't, D&D pretty much, there's no real way of being much, except for
more specialized than that?
Yeah. Except for via feats. It's been like that at least.
Yeah.
I'll say it was like that in third edition as well. Like, realistically, for the most part, sans feats, every character of the same level and class is exactly as good as the other, not taking stats into account.
Yeah. And that's fine, but I'm used to having more
because in
specialization
D6,
than that.
Because in D6, you can start off with, like, if you max out your attribute, we'll just use human as an example. If you max out your attribute, so you're 4D in whatever attribute the skill is under, the way that D6 works, you're
taking
already,
blaster.
Taking blaster.
So it'd be under dex again.
So you already have 4D, which already makes you
professional level.
A professional level, which means that the average, we'll say, cop or whatever, average soldier, actually, I think would fit better. The average soldier is going to be as good as, or you're going to be as good as the average soldier before you put any skill dice into that skill with a 4D dex. Then, let's say you wanted to have that be one of your skills, and you're like, I want this to be my, like, really good. You could add into 2D at character creation, be at 6D, which would mean you would be the best on a continent or something like that, I think it's
best in so many thousand.
Okay, yeah, best in 100,000.
I think.
Yeah. And then, because you're like, you know what? I only am going to use a blaster pistol. So, I'm going to split another D in character creation into 3.
Divide by 3.
Add in an additional 1D starting So whenever I use blaster pistols, I'll be at 7D, which then puts you at whatever the next level is, best in 500,000 or whatever. As a starting character, you can actually legitimately be one of the best people anyone will come across
with a blaster pistol.
With a blaster pistol or with a sword, because, it works across all the various different skills. But yeah, in D&D, every level 1 character is fully balanced. That was actually one of the things, and I'm sorry, I know I go off topic. Forgive me. Or don't. Your call. When I was looking between D6 and D20 for Star Wars, I remembered reading in the book where they were like, this is pretty much a quick and dirty way of transferring your characters from the West End system to the Wizards of the Coast system. And I'm like, I could make 2 separate starting characters. And you know what? One of them would have ended up being like a level 12 or 13, and the other one would be like a level 1. 2 starting characters, because it's like, because of your proficiency bonus, because you started off with 6D or 7D, because you're a Wookiee or whatever, in this, in this skill. Well, that means that your attack bonus, the way that they worked in it, was like, but the very fact that it was like that, it's like, whereas with skills, it pretty much was, because everything's been combat oriented for D&D style games specifically for a while. But when it came to skills, it's like, because I had a character who was legitimately just a scholar, they're like, yeah, you can't do that. Like, your skill would be too high to really fit in a starting character, and if it was that high but your attack skills were that low, it wouldn't work. You got to be kidding me. Wish I could find those books now, but whatever. Anyways, continue going, Bees, if you'd like to, or we've been going for a half hour. So
that's about all I've got, honestly. It doesn't mean I'm not going to like the system. It doesn't mean I'm not going to enjoy playing the system. It just means I have a lot of critiques of the system. It doesn't do what I'm used to D6 being able to do. It doesn't do what I look forward to being able to do in a role-playing system. Having the rules there, and D6 doesn't have very complicated rules either. In fact, it probably has less of them, all said and done, than Dungeons and Dragons does, because every class has their own rule sets and their own specializations, and every subclass has their own additional abilities that they're able to do. And it's very specific for what you can build in a class and in a subclass, and then you have your options of what you take for spells that mixes it up, or what you take for maneuvers for a battle master. But
I'm going to be honest, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you, but I also started off with D6, so I know I'm biased. But I think for some people, the ease of this system comes in that unless you're talking about damage, because of specific weapons or various stuff, everything just revolves around literally one, and I don't mean like one type, but one dice. You're rolling a D20 for pretty much everything save weapon damage or damage in general.
Oh, that's another thing. Damage has all these different dice rules to it. That's why you need one of these.
What do you mean damage has...
Everything has its own damage dice.
Well, yeah, because, a broadsword does like 1d6 damage or 1d8 damage as opposed to a rapier, which does 1d6 damage as opposed to... But that makes, that makes sense. In Star Wars, you had, one weapon might do strength plus 1d. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm used to a system that deals with the same problems just as well, if not better. And it's simpler and more complex at the same time. It simplifies the things I like simplified. It makes complex the things I like complex. And I'm going into this with an open mind. Like, this is my rant with you guys out there in Truckerland and with Buse. It is not, I'm not going to be thinking about this a lot when I'm playing the game. I'm going to be playing the game. I'm going to be in character. I'm going to be enjoying myself. Fiona has GM'd for us a couple small games before. It's enjoyable. She's a good GM. Looking forward to it. It's going to be a good time. But the abstract. I mean, I'm not. That's not the only thing that matters to me. I like the abstract. I like theory crafting. I enjoy all of that stuff. So I'm seeing the limitations of this system, and it's not a bad system. And going back to simplicity. Do you know what the most played class, subclass, the most played class and subclass in D&D 5th edition is? Take a wild guess.
I'm going to go Ranger, Fighter?
Fighter, subclass, champion. Bring up the champion subclass.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Remember, folks, this is the most played subclass in D&D. And it is a viable subclass, by the way. It is generally ranked somewhere on a scale from S to being super tier. Then you got your A, B, C, D, F tier. I don't know if there's any F tier classes. It is generally ranked A or B.
Give me a second.
Take your time. I'm not doing anything. And if it gets boring, you'll just zip through it in the editing. Zip through it in the editing!
That requires me doing more editing than I've been doing recently.
Or people will just fast forward through the boring parts.
Or they'll stop watching. One of them.
So the first ability you get, if I remember correctly, increases your critical from, you only get a critical on 20 to you get a critical on 19 and 20. Does that look right?
Yep. Improve critical. So yeah, third level when you choose this, your weapon attack score critical hit on roll a 19 or 20.
All right,
that's another issue I have with this as opposed to third edition. It used to be the weapons would give you additional, like certain weapons would have a higher threat range. But anyways, so yeah, so that makes so you're going to be critting more often.
All right. So what do you have to do as a player to accomplish that? Do you have to roll extra dice? Do you have to remember any skill sets, any magical spells?
No, you just have to be that class and subclass.
Right. So what's the next thing in Champion? Now that you got it in front of you.
At 7th level, add half your proficiency bonus to any check that doesn't already use your proficiency bonus. So pretty much it means that I've got something similar in mind. But yeah, it pretty much means that you're, for lack of a way of putting it, more resistant to everything and less likely to fail because you're...
Does it really add much to what you actually have to do in the game and remember to play?
No, you just have to remember, oh, cool, now I get to add additional numbers.
Yeah, I get to throw in, instead of 2 for my proficiency
bonus. And you're writing
bonus,
it on your character
1.
sheet anyway. So.
And you're writing it on your character sheet anyway. What's the next thing in Champion?
Under that, too, you can make a longer running long jump. But
okay.
after that, at 10th level, you get a second fighting class style feature.
Okay, that's...
Which I don't know what that is.
Those are generally... a statistical bonus that you add in, like as an archer, I get +2 to all my archery attacks. So I'm a ranged attacker or whatever, archery bonus or whatever. So there's the other combat, whatever they're called there, are all like that. Mostly like that. The fighting styles. They give you a small bonus to, well, actually in this game, a large bonus to one of your attacks or your defensive rolls. So what's the next one? You notice again, this isn't another skill you're getting. This isn't something you have to wait to recharge at a short rest. Is it a short rest or is it a long rest? What does it do? What does it do if I cast it at this spell level versus that spell level? Do I have to remember I used a spell slot? Nope. Champion is the simplest class to play in the game, bar none. You pretty much just play like a normal fighter and you get bonuses while you do it.
But yeah, higher threat range goes to 18. And then the last one, at 18th level, you are the pinnacle of resilience. At the start of each of your turns, you regain hit points equal to 5 plus your Constitution modifier.
Which is probably going to be 5, so you're getting 10 more hit points per turn.
If you have no more than half of your hit points left. So if you're below half,
you get 10 hit points.
As long as you're not at 0. So as long as you're between 1
what level
to
is
half,
that?
18. Yeah. So I mean, it's decently high, but
it's at the end of the game, and you're big. And let's face it, none of these are small bonuses. These are all nice, very nice things to have. Having said that, it is the simplest class to play by far in the game, and it's the most popular one. So there's something to be said for the simplicity that neither Buse or I particularly like, and it's not what we're looking for in an RPG. But once you get past all the convoluted spells and rules and this and that and character creation, figuring out all your saves and your modified this and that, and what do you have proficiencies in, and what do you have saves in, and all of that, and you got to sit there with a guide to figure it all out the first 10 times you do it, or you got to go through D&D Beyond or whatever it is, have somebody show you how to do it with tutor, and you got your college education, you mastered in making character creation for D&D, or at least you got your associate's degree, so you know you can do this right. You still can't teach it, but you can do it right on your own with your associates. You need a master's degree in D&D character creation if you actually want to give formal training, or your teaching certificate with a bachelor's. All so you can play one of the simplest RPGs I've ever seen. And you know what? I honestly think I'm going to have a blast playing. Yeah, I'm finding more and more as I get in what little test playing I've been able to do. As I get into it, I think it's going to be very easy to pick up once you get past character creation and once you learn your class and everyone else's class and memorize the monster manual and all the stat blocks for all the creatures so you know what you're going up against. Even though you probably shouldn't be using that while you're at the table, you still want to know it so you've got an idea of what your characters will be facing so you know where to put your saves, where to put what kind of items. And that doesn't even get into magic items. There's tables upon tables of magic items that are available that are all very specified.
You said you were going to talk about that this episode. I feel like that was a lie.
That's about all there is to it. It's very specific. And you've got levels of magic items that as they get better quality, they add very small bonuses. This game is all about small bonuses. What we would consider a small bonus in any other game is a big bonus here in D&D. A +1 is really something in 5th edition. And it is. It really is. So when I was asking Fiona repeatedly, is there any spell out there, any way out there for me to be able to summon arrows so I don't have to worry about ammunition as I'm running around? She's like, well, there's not really one.
Oh, really? I thought in 3rd edition, I feel like there was at some point.
Probably.
Or maybe that might have been for one of the advanced classes like Arcane Archer. But
well, I would want, as Arcane Archer or whatever, as an archer, I would want the ability to summon arrows. There's no fletching skill, or maybe there is a fletching skill, but it costs just as much to create the item as it does to buy the item. So why would anyone ever bother creating? You can just go to the store and buy it for the exact same price it would cost you to buy the materials to make it. So why bother making it? It doesn't make sense. Just buy it. And then if it breaks, have your buddy with the mend cantrip fix it for you. By the way, Crenshaw took the mend cantrip. I was going to take it, and then I realized he had it on his sheet. So there you go.
I was thinking about taking it, but I don't know, because I've been reading stuff. It's funny. I didn't actually ever think about it previously, but in a lot of games, like stuff I've been reading online, they're like, yeah, and in case your stuff breaks in mid-battle, I'm like, how often does that happen?
That depends on your GM and how much they're paying attention to it and what the tone of your campaign is. How realistic is it? How superhuman, how cartoony is it? Going back to ammunition, most of the higher level bows and ammo using weapons produce their own ammunition magically. So no, there's not a spell for me to do it. But if I can get an item that does it, and items, which they don't even talk about in most of character creation, end up becoming a major part of who your character is. And it's important, and all the items have a name to it, like freaking EverQuest. You know how in EverQuest for like the short sword of Yakisha or the mask of deception, the guise of deception. Yeah. These are things that, as EverQuest players who played in the classic era, we know exactly what those weapons are as soon as you mention it because it was important to know. That's the same thing with D&D, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
But a broom of flying. It's a flying broom. It's a broom that gives you the flying ability. You got to sit on it and hold on to it with both hands. So you're not really doing anything else while you're, flying with your broom. But you can get a broom of flying, a ring of invisibility, a bunch of things. Dragon scale armor, I think, was one of the things. And there's lists upon lists upon lists of very specific magic items, which is kind of cool. I used to love poring over figuring out what guns I wanted to use as a Star Wars character with, like Deathwatch Mando over here. He's got his 2 blasters. The Thunderer from Star Wars D6. It was the only 6D damage heavy blaster pistol, the Thunderer.
Mm-hmm.
But the general rule for creating heavy blaster pistols are they carry half as much ammo or a quarter as much ammo as a regular blaster pistol, but they do an additional D to 2D of damage, which is quite a bit. And
that's why
D6.
they had less ammo, because
Yeah,
it was overcharging it, but it was more wasteful, because a normal 4D blaster pistol had 100 ammo, but you would lose 3/4 of the ammo in order to have 1 extra D of damage.
Or 2, yeah, in the case of the Thunderer. And you lost more than half the ammo. I think the Thunderer only had 25 rounds to it. But boy, if you could hit with those rounds, you were doing some serious damage, hopefully, unless you rolled all
as
one.
we talked about, for characters who knew they wanted to be
Specialized.
Yeah, specialized. Although almost everybody in Star Wars, I mean, everybody's using blasters, unless you have a lightsaber. Yes, I made some melee focused characters, but realistically, everybody carried a blaster. Most combat was ranged.
Yeah, that's what happens after you get something equivalent to a revolver or better.
Mm-hmm.
It's a logical consequence of that. So I think that's all I've got on D&D. I think this is good. I think we're going to have a lot of fun, despite us being, if not negative, then critical of the system. There's a lot of things that the system is leaving me lacking. I don't know how Fiona is going to be about giving out magic items, or what magic items are going to be available.
Well, we're gonna have to do some dungeon crawls before we even have that chance.
It's been a long time since I've done a dungeon crawl. Mostly, I don't do dungeon crawls. I run missions and rescue people, and actually diving into a dungeon and doing Indiana Jones style archaeology, which is not regular archaeology. It's Indiana Jones style archaeology.
It's grave robbing.
It's not even grave robbing. Like, grave robbing is digging up bones. This is going into sunken temples and fighting the traps that probably shouldn't still be active because they're so old, but are somehow. And the denizens who are living in those dungeons, even though, how do they not all have scurvy or rickets from the lack of sunlight? Anyway, I think it's going to be a really good time. She already showed us last week. She sent us a picture of, and this is going to be a clue for what the game is going to be about. Showed us a relief that had carved images in it that looked like something out of either Egypt or Mesopotamia. Probably Mesopotamia. And I started making ancient alien jokes immediately. Yeah, hopefully it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. Ready to call it quits? We only went for almost an hour this time.
I know. Well, we appreciate it, truckers. I don't know if this is going to be our only one tonight, but I'll just let you...
All right. If anybody out there knows somebody from Warner Brothers who could listen to a movie pitch, I have movies to pitch. I have ideas, and I don't know what I'm doing as far as getting somebody to listen to a pitch, but I do know how to craft a story. And I have a pretty good pulse on what people are watching these days, what they like, what they don't like, and I'd love to pitch for you guys and see if you agree with me. So, if anybody knows somebody, have them give me a shout out in the comments down below. Send us a message through YouTube or Facebook if we're still posting on Facebook. And you know what, truckers? Just keep on trucking.